So you sit in a shed all day, Kalen? That's what you do? Okay, yeah. That's weird. But it's like, you know what I mean?
I
It's
know
like,
exactly what you mean. Hey, this is Kalen. Welcome to the Commerce Hero Podcast. Mike Sudyk, episode number 74. How are we doing, sir? How you doing today?
man, I just did some pull-ups. I am doing great. I
You're
got a
ready to
pull-up bar in
go.
my basement, and I'm fired up to talk to
Dude,
Kalen Jordan. It's not every
it's
day you get to talk
it's
to Kalen Jordan.
it's not every day, man. I mean, and I know that, you have these guests on your podcast that are so high level. So I'm trying my best to get on that level. Um, the pull-up bar I love. Do you do that before every meeting now and just get hyped up? Like that seems like such a great like little quick hack to just get like
I would, I
ready to
probably
go.
should do it before every meeting, but I do it when I'm just like dragging. I'm just like, you get to a point like, what is it, like a promoto timer, or what do they call that? Where
Oh,
it's like
Pomodoro,
90
Pomodoro,
Pomodoro,
20
yeah.
minutes.
Pomodoro.
Yeah.
I obviously do it if I can't even say what it's called. Um, is that like 90 minutes? I feel like somewhere it was like a 90
I
minute thing. Like
think
you can't
it's
concentrate for more than 90 minutes. Or maybe that's
Yeah, it could
less.
be
Maybe
90. I've seen versions of it that are like 20, or I think
yeah,
I think there's different ways to do it, but I think that the basic idea of like consistent breaks after focused
yeah.
chunks of time is definitely makes sense, you know.
Yeah. Well, 90 minutes, it's like, for some reason that was in my head. And then I would notice like, man, I'm just feeling like spaced out. Like I need to focus. And it's like, sure enough, it's like 90 to, plus
Right.
minutes have gone
Like
by. And you're
on
like,
the
okay, I got
dot.
to get out of here.
Yeah.
The only problem is, and then relating to the dad thing is like, sometimes the kids are playing that right in the basement. So like my office area is like kind of secluded. And then so
Yeah.
like if I emerge, I
Yeah.
can sometimes get roped into like the kids. It's like I gotta like sneak out, do some pull-ups, and then like
Right.
come back in.
Oh, so the pull-up bar is in a different part of the house. It's not.
It's in the basement, but it's in an area where like some of their toys are. So it's like sometimes they'll play
Gotcha.
there. The kids will play there.
Gotcha.
So if I go out there, it's like I don't want to just like go out there and then leave, or they'll be like, "Hey,
Right.
dad," all this stuff,
Yeah, you
which
gotta.
is good. But it's kind of
Yeah.
like you gotta ensure you don't get too sucked in if you got to get some stuff done. So
Yeah. Work-life
yeah,
balance. It's the name
yeah,
of the
man,
game.
yeah,
Yeah, I got to get that going, dude. Actually, matter of fact, I just realized I could probably put one in my shed and then I could just literally
yes.
like boom, 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 boom. That'd probably be the easiest place to put it. Um,
So I don't know
but
if you noticed mine because it was just a bar that goes across.
yeah,
Like our basement
yeah,
has
just a
exposed,
bar. Yeah,
things.
yeah,
And so my wife actually was like, I was like, I think I want to put it here. She's like, as long as we paint it white, then you can't really even see it. That's fine, And it's
yeah.
like,
It
boom,
was
nothing
perfect.
fancy.
It's incognito. And like
Yeah.
I was looking at pull-up bars and you got the you were busting my chops about it, which was well deserved. I appreciate the accountability because there's these ones you put right in your door, and they just use leverage or whatever, but then people say that
Yeah.
they'll fall or you might rip a hole in your. So then there's the more heavy duty ones that you bolt into your studs. So I was
Yeah.
thinking about that, but I was like, that's a job. But these
That
are
is
all
a job.
excuses. These are all
These
excuses. I
are
got to
all
get it going.
excuses. I just
Um,
want you to say that they're all excuses. I don't want to
I,
be the one always saying they're all excuses.
I, I appreciate it, man. No, but I like the pull up thing because like pull ups are great because you just get in there. It takes you about 8.5 seconds before you're maxed out. So it's
Mhm.
one of those things like push-ups take time. Like if you're gonna do
Yeah.
push-ups, you're gonna be there for a little while. So I like this idea of just doing quick in and out pull-ups in the middle of your day.
I started following a guy, Jack Colson, who does like, I think it's Colson. He does all this like body resistance training. That's like all he's about. Like you don't need a gym, it's all
Got it.
pull ups, push ups, all this
Body
stuff.
weight. Yeah.
And I just love the body weight stuff because it's like, I don't got time. I don't even have a gym membership, And
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of like, I just like to be able to do stuff when I want to do it. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. It makes it real simple. So to start things off today, man, I saw you tweeted the Subway bread article. I want to start off with something fun, okay? I gotta call BS. I'm calling BS on this thing that Subway bread is too sugary to be considered bread. Like I've started to learn to assume like most headlines I read may or may not be true. There might be some funny, and I thought the same thing when I first saw it. I was like, wow, but I haven't looked into it at all. Have not read the science, the underlying articles. But they have some breads that are sugary than others, but a lot of that bread is just bread, man. So
Yeah.
I'm not buying it. I'm not buying that. You know, I'm Team
Yeah.
Subway. I'm Team Subway on this
Team
one.
Subway. There you go. I enjoy my Subway. I will continue to enjoy my Subway. That doesn't have any bearing on it. It's funny though. Your reaction is kind of a microcosm of where we're at in 2020. I don't believe any headlines. I believe they're pretty much crap. I'm
Yeah,
just gonna believe what I gotta believe, and that I'm with you on that.
totally.
It's kind of just like, but
Well,
that's 2020,
it's
man. That's
it
it.
is, and it's a good thing and a bad thing, but it's like it's given everybody kind of a crash course in realizing that not every story you see is true. And everybody knew that. Like, that's not
Yeah.
news. It's just that we've seen so many in such quick succession that I feel like it's like trained me a little bit. I see a news story and there's part of my brain that immediately believes it. And then I'm learning to go like, what if that's not true? What if that is just
Yeah.
not true? You know? Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it is funny, but it's also, I mean, it's a big part of like news and all of the heavy
Where do we
topics
where do
that
we
are.
go from here though, Kalen? Like that's what I don't understand. Like we are so I feel like with the whole news with Trump getting COVID, right? Like that was the big news of today.
Yep.
And then it's like what else is going to happen? Everyone's like I think I saw someone tweet out and then I posted on Facebook like the aliens are going to land tomorrow. Like that's the next act of the script, right? Like but just par for the course for 2020. But it's kind of like what happens, and I don't mean to make this like go like hyper political. It's not really political. It's just like it's gotten so like we are so overwhelmed with
Yeah.
stimulus of all the events of the world going on, and you
Yeah.
have all of these media outlets that are hyper spinning them and sensationalizing them. Not to say there's not bad things, and not to say those things don't happen all the time,
Yeah.
but you get numb to it,
Yeah.
and
Totally.
something has to break or something. Like something has to happen, don't you think?
Someone's got. I was thinking the same thing today. I was like, I was hearing somebody, sort of theorizing that if the Supreme Courts get packed, that could be the end of the country, whatever. And regardless of how wherever you land on that, it feels like things are getting so like when you're watching a movie and they're just escalating to this point of resolution in the movie because it's a movie and it has to resolve. But like I really, yeah, I don't know. I hope that we can look back on this and go like, hey, we got through worse things than this in the past. We got through
Yeah.
all sorts of wars and things like that. So like it's not, we'll get through it, but sometimes it does feel like where do we go from here? I totally know what you mean.
I don't know, man.
It's tough, man.
It's bizarre.
Well, to switch over to a little bit of a simpler topic here that we can maybe make some.
Let's tone it down a little bit because once we go there, we can't go anywhere else from there, right? Like once we.
Let's ease into this thing. So you posted about 2 of the quickest life hacks with near instant results: drinking lots of water and smiling intentionally. And I've actually been doing both of these, sort of, like mostly coffee,
Yes.
but water as well. And just recently, I started to do this smiling thing. This smiling thing, like I know what it is.
It's amazing.
But like literally, like I started to do this thing where I realized, like when I step into the house and I see the kids and maybe there's something I want them to clean up, maybe they didn't finish their whatever. Like I always seem to walk into the house when I take a break and from my shed into the house, and then there's something
Yeah.
I want to say or ask somebody. And then I started to like smile before I start talking, and I realized my tone was lighter. I was less like aggressive. And that's been like, I don't know, like a week that I've been doing that. So it really
That
is
is
like, it
great.
really is huge. Yeah.
You know where I first like picked up on that? It wasn't that long ago. It was like the airport.
Was
I
it?
was walking through the airport and everyone is frowning. I was
Right.
traveling for some work trip. Everyone's just like
Right.
serious. And I was just like a crazy person. I just smiled. I'm like walking.
I'm the
I'm like
same
not
way,
even
dude.
talking on the phone. I'm just like, I just started smiling. I'm like, I'm going to smile at people. My mood changed. I was
Yeah.
happier. It was
Yeah.
great. You know,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
totally changed my mood like instantly. And
Dude,
so I started to do it a little
I
more. And
that's great, man.
airport's a sad place, I feel like.
They are tough, man. It's funny because we went to LA recently for some family stuff, and I was, born and raised in LA, been living in Austin now for 2.5 years. People here are super friendly, and I've gotten used to like saying hi to people as I walk by, smiling, that kind of thing. People are just a little friendlier here. It's probably the same out there where you are, in
Hmm.
Michigan and stuff. And so, anyways, I was in LA, and people would walk by, and I'd look like make eye contact, and they would look at me like I was a psycho. Like they would like, what are you like, what are you doing? Or they wouldn't even make eye contact. It was a different vibe. So yeah, but so have you been using these two life hacks? I know you stopped coffee, right? And then you've
No,
been
I didn't
doing
stop coffee. I need to clarify that I
okay,
did not stop
okay,
coffee. I
okay.
reduced my intake of coffee. I don't want to like project something that
Don't want to
that
front.
is false. Yeah, I drastically reduced my amount of coffee and my sleep has gotten better. I've also reduced it in the afternoon. So I would sometimes find myself drinking at, 3 o'clock, even 5 o'clock. Sometimes I'd have a cup of coffee like 8 o'clock,
Oh wow.
just because it sounded good. And it's like, you got to get through bedtime somehow when you have 4 kids. Um, so, but I realized my sleep was not doing well. And
uh,
I would just not, I wouldn't wake up like I slept very soundly. And so one of the steps I took was I tried to do it not after 1 p.m. And then I have this big 40-ounce water bottle. I try to have almost one of those before I have any coffee, which is
there you go.
hard because I like to have a
Yeah,
cup of coffee right when I wake up.
yeah,
But just that alone,
yeah.
having one of those
In the
big
morning,
things
first
of
thing,
water, I think it changes like your not
it
like
turns something
chemistry. I
on.
don't know what's
Yeah,
happening.
yeah.
It really does. And you ingest yourself with a bunch of water. The only analogy I can think about is it's running a car with low on oil, right? If you're not having enough water.
Totally.
So it's not a good thing, right? It's like you're pouring this new fresh oil in it and everything's grinding and then all of a sudden it's smooth again.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, I've
that's
heard
been
that
good.
so many times. You know how you hear something like so many times and you're like, that's probably a good idea before you actually do it. And I've heard the morning water thing, and you were one of the ones that posted about it. And I've tried doing it. I've tried doing like having a full glass of water or two glasses of water, and it's always good. And it's surprising how hard it is to like discipline yourself to do that. Like there's something about your
Yeah.
body that just doesn't want to sit there and drink a bunch of water. But it feels like the healthiest way to start the day for sure. And
Yeah. Totally.
yeah, I want
I've
to.
been one other thing I've been doing that I was skeptical of for a long time. This has been more of just the past 2 weeks, maybe. I have been hesitant to eat early in the day. So I
Yeah,
think I've been skipping breakfast, which I think the hip thing to say is to call it is intermittent fasting. I think that's what the cool kids are
that's what
calling it.
I
I don't
do.
know. I think it's
Yeah,
just
that's what I
skipping
call
breakfast.
it.
I'm intermittent fasting.
It
So you skip
sounds a lot
breakfast. All right, yeah,
fancier.
that's what I do.
Yeah.
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 But it's funny because it's more of to me it was more of a realization that I shouldn't just eat when I think I need to eat. I need to listen to my body a little bit more. And it's the same with the water. If I wake up and I'm very slightly hungry or not even really hungry, but I'm like, oh, I should eat something so I'm not hungry later,
Mhm,
I usually don't feel very good. And some days I'll just wake up, I'm just not hungry. I'll down a
mhm,
bunch of water and then I get hungry about, 10, maybe 11 o'clock. And then I'll
mhm,
have a meal for lunch, but I'm not crazy fanatical about it where if
mhm,
I'm hungry, I don't eat.
mhm, mhm.
And to me, it's just tuned me into listening to my body a little more to
Yeah.
say, don't eat when you're not hungry, and
Mm,
B, don't stuff your face just because something is good, like
yeah,
pizza,
yeah,
which is like that's my Achilles heel.
dude.
We
I
order
want to,
pizza for the family. It's like like 10 pieces.
dude. It's absurd how much pizza I can eat. Like it doesn't even make any sense. Tomorrow's like my cheat day, and I'm definitely getting eating pizza tomorrow. That's like I'm ready to
Yes,
go.
yes,
Um,
that's great.
it's yeah, but listening to your body, I've been thinking about that so much lately. Like it's something that is so important. Like it's so weird that we have a hard time listening to our bodies. Um, it's counterintuitive in some ways. Like it seems like, oh well, of course you know how you feel, like you're feeling it. But
Hmm.
whether it's work related or with whether you're hydrated or not, whatever, like a lot of times you're just not quite fully conscious of it. Um, and yeah, I'm trying to be more like even as I'm working, I'm trying to be more aware of like what mode I'm in as I'm working. Am I in like a
Mm,
creative mode? Am I in like a connecting type of a mode or like a programming? And those are all kind of different states of mind for me a little bit, you know? And
hmm.
yeah, it's just so important to listen to your body
Yeah.
in terms of exercise and everything else. So let's talk about building a community for dads.
All
This is
right. All
something we've
right.
talked about a little bit. You know, I've been super impressed with the 2 Cent Dad podcast
Yeah.
and all the amazing guests you get on there. So, what is your vision for building out kind of a community to sort of help dads become a better version of themselves, be more intentional? This is a lot of what I see on your social media is like stuff related to this, and I think you're putting so much good stuff out into the world, you know. And where do you see this thing going?
Well, thanks for the compliments. And thanks for being part of the journey, Kaylin. And I think you've been actually a part of encouragement just in what I've been doing. So thank you, man. Um,
Absolutely,
that's a
man.
good question. Um, that's a really good question. I think for me, it comes down to where the whole thing started was I wanted to just get real feedback from kind of boots on the ground dads that were
Mm-hmm,
doing this and trying to balance the tension between building something of value and actually being an engaged father.
mm-hmm,
And so that's where the podcast started. I think as I think of something in the future, it's interesting. I was having a call with a guy just yesterday, and we kind of have a similar relationship like that you and I have, where we're kind of friends. We met online. We've never met in person
mm-hmm.
before. We share similar values,
Those are the best.
and yeah, they're great. And I'd like to change the whole never met in person at some point, though. We
Yes,
got to get our families
absolutely.
together.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But it was interesting because he reached out to me and he says, we haven't talked in a while, and I'd like to have a call with you. And I would file that under the category of there's a it's a mixed purpose call, but it's not fully just relational. I don't really want to just shoot the breeze with him necessarily,
Right,
but I want to talk about some serious business type things too, but it's not
right,
completely business. I'm not just looking at it as a transaction. So we're
right.
both busy, we don't have a lot of time, and it's like I want to connect and see how you're doing because I want to relate to you on that level, but I also want to say, hey, how can we help one another? And how can I help keep you accountable too? And so similar to another, interaction I had with a buddy of mine, came to our office and helped me think through some of our sales strategy. And he's a guy that knows me. We have a good relationship. He has contextual knowledge of sales and what we're trying to do. And we spent some time just brainstorming, about an hour and a half, just brainstorming some different things. And that was extremely valuable because of all of those components. So I was talking with my buddy yesterday, we were thinking, how do you make that more structured or build a community around that? Or how do you make that less serendipitous? Or, what do you do?
And
And
yet
it's not a
sometimes,
mastermind group.
right, and sometimes
Go
the
ahead.
serendipity is part of what makes it awesome, right?
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
I
Yeah, you're
totally
right.
get it of like how do you bottle those, like how do you take those moments of encouragement, growth, accountability and kind of package them up? Like I totally, but I've been in like accountability groups and things where the routine of it kind of takes away from some of the magic versus when it's more serendipitous, random.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just,
No, and I think that I agree with you. Some of the if you add too much structure, it robs it of its value, and if you add too many people, it robs it of its value, and if you add not the right people, it robs it of its value. It's like
right,
you want to add people that are actually trying to do it and not are just talking
right,
about it or whatever thing that
right,
is,
right,
and
right,
are at a similar point in the journey or one step ahead or one step behind, the
right.
members. And so the reason I bring this up, Kalen, is it's related to what my vision is for 2 Cent Dad. It's like I don't want to just create some mastermind group or something that's highly structured or just a kind of a run of the mill,
Mm-hmm.
site, or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that is, but it would be how do you organize it in such a way that there's dads that want to be intentional. They want to surround themselves with other dads that want to be intentional, and there's a level of accountability to each one of those, and I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
we'll
It's a
see. I don't
tricky,
I don't know what the next step is.
it's
Yeah.
a tricky thing to figure out. I saw this. I've been thinking about like community a lot recently and as well as like software and tools to kind of enable it. You've got Slack groups, you've got Twitter itself, you've got so many different things. And I saw somebody post recently that like there needs to be like a tool that allows people to create sort of custom communities. Because like
Hmm.
they were saying, they gave a few examples, like every community that really takes off is kind of very unique and custom. Like it's just not like a cookie cutter Slack group or a cookie cutter mastermind or
Yeah.
whatever. So I was like, that's interesting. Like that concept of like giving you the tools to create something, but like it's going to be unique. There's going to be aspects of
Yeah.
it that are unique. To kind of facilitate all those things. And it's funny, like with accountability, like I've been in accountability groups in the past, and
Hmm.
there's, there can be good to them, but then they can get into this funk routine kind of a thing where like there's not like, it's just same old kind of a thing. And it's funny because we were joking about the pull up bar accountability thing, but literally that kind of thing, like busting my chops on Twitter or whatever, is actual
Yeah.
accountability to me and actually is making me think about getting the pull up bar going. And it
Yeah.
was just, you could say it was just a tweet, but like to me that stuff is real community,
Yeah.
even though
Yeah.
it's.
Oh, I'm with you 100%. And that's, that relates to your social media feed is what you make it. I
Yeah,
think you can get tremendous value out of something like Twitter, or you can get way more negative and you can get hyper polarized from something like Twitter or
right,
like from Twitter. So
right.
you have to curate that. And I think that's something I'm realizing a lot more just the last 6 months. And COVID's a great example because there's people that used it to get better, and there's people that used it as an excuse for
Mm,
mediocrity, or they let it get them down. And
yeah,
but the interesting thing, this is related to my vision for 2 Cent Dad because I started it because I wanted to just talk to dads very selfishly. I didn't really care what anyone else thought. I just wanted a reason to talk to these people, primarily, well-known people in the business world.
yeah,
And 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 then it kind of turned into something like, wow, there was people finding value from it. It started to gain traction, and I didn't have a clear next step, other than I wanted to just keep unpacking these ideas. And so I think the near term is to package up some of the ideas and lessons.
mm,
But it's interesting that you say that level of accountability, because one of the things I like about doing the podcast is I'll talk to someone and they have an insight and it makes me better.
hmm.
It's like, I don't even care if that makes Kalen Jordan better. It's like, it's helping me. So
Just selfishly,
that's great.
it's
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Selfishly, which is that makes it more authentic in a lot of ways,
yeah,
but it goes against you if you're trying to strategically grow the audience. And that's some of the stuff I want to talk a little bit more today too
yeah,
about. But the thing related to that works against you is there'll be times when I feel like I'm a crappy dad and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
doing a good job. My
Mm-hmm.
wife and I are fighting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm short
Mm-hmm.
with the kids. I'm
Yep.
not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And then
Yep.
I'm like, yeah, right. I can't be putting out any content on 2 Cent Dad. Like I'm a
Right.
freaking hypocrite.
I'm
It's
a
like
hypocrite.
imposter
Yeah.
syndrome or whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it.
Yeah.
And the irony there is I need to hop on a call with someone that can keep me accountable and kind of amp me up. Someone that can bust
Right.
my chops about a pull-up bar, like that can be
Yeah.
like, listen, no, I'm not going to listen to you whine. I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you, I'm going to help you unpack this problem and I'm going to get you out of your own way.
Yeah.
And this is how you can live up to what you're supposed to live up to. And so that's something I'm even realizing in the last like 6 months or so is like, I need to just keep putting it out there and not to be disingenuous, still be transparent in that whole journey. But the whole point is, there needs to be a level of accountability and a community to help dads that are dealing with this work life, tension
Mm-hmm.
be better and further embrace their role as a father very intentionally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. And it's one of those things where there's lots of ways to find that. There's lots of great places on social media where you can find people that are going to encourage you and push you in that way. Um, if you want to take the time to do it. But I think if there's a way that you can package it up and make it really easy for people to onboard into that and to get a bunch of content, there could be a lot of value in that. And then at the same time, it's like, well, there has to be that level of motivation too for like the individual. Like if the individual, like there's no replacement for the individual wanting it and caring enough to go figure it out. You know what I mean? But yeah, there just has to be something to do there because I think it's such a need. And it's like, I mean, the caliber of guests that you've gotten, it's hard to think of another podcast because there's so many podcasts that are so similar that are talking about business, that are talking about market, whatever. And there's this really unique niche that you've gotten because it's genuinely something you care about. And I think that there's tons and tons of people like you and me that care about this and are trying to figure it out. And there's just like a gap there in content and in community, I think.
Yeah.
So hopefully
the interesting. So you brought up the notion of, you have to want it almost, and you have to, there's the motivation. How do you, it kind of speaks to the accountability groups that if the accountability group goes kind of stale,
yeah,
you can blame the accountability group or you can look in the mirror, because I've been in those groups too, you're kind of like, oh, this isn't really doing anything for me. It's like, and you have to say, well, you get out of it what you put in, So, but that being said, I believe there are certain barriers for certain people at certain times that are causing them to be less engaged or to be less amped up or intentional or whatever. And that's where the content or the community can kind of come in, right? That's where you can say, if you picture something like Choose a Dad community or whatever you want to call it, there has to be a mechanism where they can come in at whichever level they're at, and then they can engage with content, and the content's going to speak to what are their barriers, what are their typical barriers at a certain time. It's almost like a choose your own adventure type thing, right? You might be a brand new dad, or you might be a dad that's trying to be re-engaged, and they got kids that are like toddlers or a little bit more older, or older, or something of that nature. And so, I think there's an interesting dynamic there where there's that content piece, but then there's how do you connect dads with other dads to encourage or to, and I don't know what that is, because is that like a meetup or a Slack call or, Zoom call or something? And even that gets a little bit weird. I don't know, it has to be done well. And I think both of you, you and I both have the experience to know that there's a lot of bad ways to do something. And there's a lot of people putting a lot of bad crap out there. So you're kind of like, and maybe that's a crutch to some degree, because you're like, I kind of know what world-class quality is, and that's not it, but I don't really know what the solution is, right?
I know what it doesn't look like, but I know what it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's
So it's this
always,
weird dynamic.
yeah, that's always part of that process of like putting something new out into the world, is like knowing there's some, like you like found this amazing niche, and I think to myself, I'm like, wow, this is like really interesting that you identified it, you cared enough about it, and then you've been putting in the consistent work in it. Um, and in hindsight, it's like obvious to me, like obviously there's so many dads that
Yeah.
are on this kind of like journey. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, when you don't, you know, something isn't quite there and you want to create something, but you don't know what it's going to look like. That's, you know, that's the journey. Um,
So what do you feel like, what are some of the things that you think about if you think about Two Cent Dad? Because I think when we were messaging before, I was like, I want to brainstorm this on the call because I wanted to get your feedback.
yeah.
Um, so my near-term objectives for Two Cent Dad, like the next step that I'm taking is producing more content in the form of podcasts, being more active on Twitter to grow that. And, but then to take the podcasts and the content I have and put them into more, like a collection
Like
of,
a
that advice. Like I
productized
want,
kind of a
yeah, I
format.
want to productize it. I want to put together like an ebook of different advice from different people,
It's a great
and
idea.
not necessarily I might just give it away for free as like a lead magnet, but beyond that, I don't have a clear vision for how that community works for all the reasons that we've already mentioned.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's where I'd like to hear your thoughts on the matter,
Well,
and where have you seen things that have worked well?
one of the things that's tricky about this is like I tend, like if somebody comes to me in the e-commerce world and is like, I want to build a product, I tell them build a B2B product, right? Build
Mm,
a product where your customer is a business. So your customer is an online store. They're going to buy your plugin, right? For them to spend a couple $100s a month is no big deal, right? It's a
yeah,
much more straightforward way to bootstrap a business. The thing that's interesting about this space is that it's a gigantic market, but it's a consumer, at the end of the day, right? It's an individual dad,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so maybe you're talking about a $5 price, it's $5 a month, $10 a month price point, or if it's an ebook, whatever that kind of a price point is. But and it's tough. The other thing too is it's tougher to find that market. Like if I want to find a business market, I can go on LinkedIn and I can search for people by category, by market, by job title. But to do it for individuals is tough. Like
hmm
but you've already got, I'm sure a good amount of traction, a good sized audience, so maybe you put out the ebook, maybe you put up a community of some kind, a Slack group or a forum. I can imagine a lot of dads wanting to participate in that.
yeah. But even if you think about, let's take the paid away, or the thinking about the money and the
Mm,
cost.
mm,
I don't want to fully remove that because I strongly believe that you don't really value something if you don't pay for it. How
yeah,
many free things do you get, or free whatever you download, and then you don't
yeah,
consume it, or you don't act on it
yeah,
because you didn't pay for it.
yeah,
Um, I think we believe that the problem is real, that there's an audience for it. The pain is there, and so I'd
mm,
like to unpack what the pain is. The pain is, so what I've identified the pain as, that there's this there's this pull where you have a business that you care about, or a job that you're really passionate about, that is a
mm,
known entity to you. There's a known problem to solve. There's a known path to get there, and you naturally gravitate towards that. There's this pull the other direction, which is your family, and you're not a deadbeat dad, and so you're not just going to fully ignore your family, but there's this real pull. You're saying it,
yeah,
but at the same time, you're not saying, "Oh, I hate this job over here and the man is keeping me down." You're saying, "I
right,
actually really care about this thing over here,
right,
but I also care about my family." So, how do you manage that tension?
yeah,
And specifically in the tech world, specifically with people that are maybe self-employed or working for a small business where they have a lot of buy-in, um,
right,
there's that pull. So
right,
there's a need for content that exists that can speak to that audience, from in that lens and can
Mm-hmm.
offer actionable advice on
Mm-hmm.
how to deal with that, right? Which I
Totally.
believe I've answered in some capacity in the podcast.
Yeah.
What I believe is that men by nature, the older you get, the less relationships you have, especially as
Yeah.
you get into fatherhood. It's like you got like friends that are kind of, your kids play soccer together or something like that, or your wives get along well, so you end up going over their house for dinner and sharing a couple beers with this guy that you don't really like or doesn't really understand you.
Yeah.
So you sit in a shed all day, Kalen? That's what you do? Okay, yeah. That's weird. But it's like, you know what I mean?
I
It's
know
like,
exactly what you mean.
and it's like, so you need the community aspect, but what you and I have experienced is varying levels of success of that community. I found some of that community just in engaging with other dads on Twitter,
Yeah.
that are sharing, that are coming at it with a very positive vibe. The pushback I have with Twitter, though, is everyone's kind of slinging an ebook or something that's on Twitter, or a course or something. So it's kind of
Right.
like anyone that has a large following on Twitter is either selling a digital product or they are just naturally famous. They're famous for some other mechanism and they just built a following on Twitter, which
Right.
is okay, I guess, but I don't know.
It's
I
yeah.
guess I'm trying to sling an e-product anyways. I'm talking about ebook, so
Well, it's a good point is that there is a lot of great stuff on Twitter, but also like anytime something is free, you are the product on some level. So whether that
yeah,
means
yeah,
you're being advertised to on Twitter or people are trying to sell you stuff. And there's different ways to sell things. I mean, there's ways to sell things that are great. People are just being helpful and giving good information, but it can get a little blurry. There was this thing I really liked recently, which kind of ties into this. There's this ebook I want to sell you. No, I'm just kidding. That would have been a good segue if I wanted to sell you an ebook. There was this virtual event for this conference I used to go to for this e-commerce conference, this Adobe thing, and they had this feature where it was called a networking feature, right? And so it's a virtual conference. You're in this online portal. You click on the networking tab, and it matches you up with some other random person for like 5 minutes. It's time boxed, so after 5 minutes it just turns off, and it just connects you up, and you start video chatting for 5 minutes. And it was really cool because like it was the closest I've felt to like that conference hallway track experience where you're at the conference and you're just networking. Um, and I love the fact that it was just 5 minutes and that it automatically kicks you off because you don't want, like, if you meet somebody and you're not connecting that much, you don't want to be awkward about like, okay, gotta go. So it's neat that it time boxes it. And I keep thinking
yeah,
about that. And I'm in the context of the dad thing, like with the audience you're talking about, right? Like those types of dads that are in tech or whatever. If there was a way I could plug into something like that and chat with 2, 3 guys for 5 minutes each, I would love to do that. There's also, I think, something for me, like there's a tension between like on the accountability, like on one side of the spectrum, there's like you got the same 3 dudes in accountability group every week for 20 years, right? And there's not enough
yeah,
maybe variety, whatever. But like you said, you can get a lot out of those as well. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's like public Twitter where you can follow whoever you want. You can sort of find mentors. You can kind of find your own accountability, but maybe something in between those where there's like a level of commitment, but it's a little bit more serendipitous, a little bit more random. I think could be kind of cool.
yeah. I like the idea of the time box to 5 minutes. That's really interesting. The buddy that I was talking about the other day that I had the call with, he mentioned that there's a startup. I can't remember what it's called, like Lunch Hour or something.
Lunch Club.
Where it
Lunchclub.ai.
Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
Lunch Club. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't checked it out. I need to check it out.
Yeah.
But it apparently it like you join a group and then you can decide if you want to have lunch, like a virtual lunch with this person, and you have a call. Is that right?
Yeah. So I did one of them. I did a podcast with my buddy yesterday who does them every week. He loves it. He does it for kind of general business networking. And it's really cool. I did one call and then I kind of didn't keep doing it, but I kind of want to continue to do it. But you schedule, it matches you up, and you do like a half hour, virtual phone call, and something like that could be really cool too. For some reason, I really liked this 5 minute format a lot
Mm-hmm.
personally. But yeah, like my
Mm-hmm.
buddy Bart, who I talked to yesterday, he loves Lunch Club. And I think that they're also kind of solving this problem. Um, in some
What
ways,
like
this, yeah, yeah.
I was just gonna say, what did you feel like? Tell me about your experience with Lunch Club. What were you hoping to get out of it? Like, what was were you just testing it out just to see
I
what it was
was,
about, or were you actually had an objective?
I was kind of testing things out. I was interested in kind of relationship building. That's something I've been trying. I mean, related exactly to what you're saying, not having enough relationships and wanting
Mm-hmm.
to build more of those. But then like you want in-person relationships too. Like I have a buddy I go hiking with out here in Austin. Like it'd be cool to have people I could hang out with locally, but it's hard to do that, right? For different reasons. So sometimes I'm just like, you know what? I'm not even going to try to make friends locally. I mean, if I do, that's great, but I'm just going to, invest in relationships, virtually, right? It's a tough
Why is
trade-off to
that?
make.
Why is that? Why would you not want to
I,
locally?
I, I
They don't have the same
would,
values. They don't know what you're
I,
talking about.
I mean, I would. It's just that all the people that I connect with the most just happen to be in other places, and it's like,
Yeah.
I think it's just a numbers. I think it's just a numbers thing, like if you randomly happen to
Yeah.
be in Austin, like that'd be awesome. Like we hang out. And then even if somebody is in Austin, like, you could be an hour and apart. Maybe I like to go hiking. Maybe like they like to get beers. So it's like sometimes it doesn't sync up perfectly, even if you are, near to each other. Um, but yeah,
So
I'm
is
trying.
it the process to get connected is one too? Like it's a little bit harder. So there's
Yeah,
inefficiencies in the connection. To
yeah,
even would you say
yeah.
it's to vet them out is kind of hard too? Like
I, I
so we
guess
had
like,
so so one of the problems that we have right now. So my wife and I, we moved up to Grand Rapids like 7 years ago,
yeah,
and we still haven't settled into to joining like a small group through our church, right?
right,
Which we think
right,
I
right,
think is a huge valuable thing. But we had a
right,
really good one in Indiana when
right.
we lived there. We moved down there for school, and then we worked down there for a little while. We're both from Grand Rapids, but the reason I bring this up is because there's this. It's like we immediately clicked with the group that we were part of in Indiana, and we tried this like young adults when we first moved here, but we had kids, and then we didn't click with them because none of
Right,
them had kids.
right,
And then we joined this other group, and we've kind of settled on this other group, but we're not really clicking with them. And it's this
right.
weird dynamic that I wanna join a group, see if it's good, and see if we click. And then if we don't, it's like awkward. You can't leave, right? You have to
Yes,
so it's in the
yes.
same vein,
That's another
with
thing.
friends. It's how you're gonna get together with them, and then you got to break up with them before it gets serious or
Right.
something, and that's just
Exactly.
awkward.
Right. Whereas if you just have somebody that's in another city, you do a call, maybe you hit it off, maybe you don't. If you don't do another call, it's like nobody's offended. Whereas
Yeah.
like, yeah, like going to that small group or whatever, like, yeah, if you don't go again, it's super awkward. So,
It's it's weird. And
yeah.
for me, I'm a naturally very extroverted person, and I get along with most people.
Yeah.
And that I believe actually makes it harder because then you have more surface level friends that
Hmm.
maybe will vie for your time. And I don't say that as if I have a whole ton of friends or anything like that, but it's you have to then be more picky because you might actually kind of enjoy hanging out with that one person, but they're not really helping you in some of your goals or helping you actually improve.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so then you spend some time with them, and you kind of come away with it like, was that a wise use of my time?
Yeah.
And that's where I get to the whole community aspect. I think I talked about this earlier with the two friends helping me with like sales advice. and not that everything has to be a consulting like lunch or something, but to some regard, you want to spend time with people that are going to help you and
Yeah,
are growth minded,
yeah,
or do you know what I mean?
totally. Like I have this buddy that is here in Austin, and we go hiking together. I'm actually gonna have him on the podcast on Monday, and we have such a good time. Like we connect. You talk about connecting on multiple levels, personal and business and things like that. And like we'll go on these hikes for 2 hours, and we're talking about life, relationships, work, Magento, e-commerce. And it's like when I am done with that, my brain is just buzzing. Like
Yeah.
I'm just lit up. Like it's great, you know.
Yeah.
And that's one of the only relationships that I have that I happen to have like that. And it's, taking time to develop and stuff like that. And yeah, but like and if we went hiking, it'd probably be similar, but we're in different
Yeah.
places. So it's just
Right.
I think like it's a numbers game on some level, but I hear this from everybody. Like I hear this from everybody. Like trying to meet people, like not, you meet people you don't quite connect. It's a dad thing, and it's broader than just a dad thing too, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, these are just sort of fundamental human issues, you know.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of specifics to that, the audience you're talking about, that dad that's has a professional life that they're committed to, and things like that. And that's a
Yeah.
good specific group to try to figure out, try to like help them be connected.
I love this. I think this notion of the whole lunch club thing could be really interesting. You almost have a vetting process, and you have the people, and then that are interested in certain topics or what have
Right.
you.
Right.
And then I don't know how that actually works, because it doesn't work in Grand Rapids yet. So I just signed
Oh,
up
that's a
while we were on
bummer.
the call. But
Nice.
it does I assume it kind of suggests, like it almost like match makes for you, and you can
Yeah.
accept or not accept,
Yeah.
right? And is
Yep.
it for an in-person lunch, or is it for a virtual lunch,
So
like a virtual call?
I think before COVID, I think it was in person.
Yeah.
And then when I did it, it was post COVID, and it was virtual by default.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's some real potential there. But yeah, like I feel like I made a conscious decision at some point of like relationships that were like, nah, like it's okay, but like we don't like really click or really encourage each other, or like, kind of like, you know what, I'll just spend time by myself instead of doing that, or like,
Yeah.
I'll just spend time with my kid. I'll go, with my family or whatever,
Yeah.
and to look for those relationships that are really awesome, and to
Yeah.
invest in those ones, you know.
Have you been part of any online groups or communities, or maybe like a group that was affiliated with a course you bought or something, that really did a really good job, that really satisfied that you connected with people for over the long period of time or something?
No, not really. And
Okay.
it's something I would like to have, and I'd be happy to pay for it too,
Yeah.
if it did satisfy that. Like, have you had any that, or like, what's the closest one that you've had that's been satisfied some of those?
The closest, I mean, has been in-person conferences. I went to a
Totally.
conference put on by Alan Branch called Less Conf,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
he was
yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah.
So he
I've
was
heard
my
about that
first
one.
guest on the podcast, and he was I met him. So I met him on Twitter. So it started with Twitter. So that's a good thing to acknowledge. And he gave me a free ticket to his conference. And this was like, I hadn't even gotten into tech. I was a mechanical engineer at the time. And then I ended up joining the family business later. But I was living in Indiana, and I drove down to Atlanta, is where they did it, and attended his conference and met like all these cool people that I still keep in contact with, him included.
Yeah.
And we're not close friends. But we drove down to Florida one year for spring break, and we met up with Alan and his family. He's got 2 young kids that are about my kids' age. And it's like he's enough of an acquaintance and a friend that I would do that, and go out of my way to connect with him.
Mhm.
But so that's an in-person event. But it was the thing that I liked about LessConf is it was kind of a polarized event. There was a certain demographic of people there because it wasn't watered down, and it was a certain size. There was probably 300 people there or something like that, maybe less actually. But they were all people in tech. They were entrepreneurs. It was just interesting that it was very similar of a group. And that's where I get to it's related to maybe that lunch club thing where you somehow have a curated group that you're going to relate to. So that's where you get to when you're talking about like a membership site, or you talk about like a community, and you really, to make any money at it, you got to have these big numbers. Well, if you have these big numbers, by nature, you're going to
lose that curated aspect of it. Yeah. Which is so huge. And it's like, the curated component, that's the thing. Like so it's funny because Twitter is where you kind of discovered that relationship. Right. And Twitter is great also for maintaining relationships in some ways, but it's not curated. Like, it's self-curated. So you have to curate your own thing, right? Whereas like if you can plug into an event, or if there's some way to take that event, and everybody's trying to take events and make them virtual, but it goes back to what you said of like, not everybody's doing a great job of it. And in some ways it's kind of impossible. It's impossible to reproduce that in-person experience with a curated group that you get, that you're describing. But I'm sure it is possible. It's just, and when I saw that networking functionality, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the closest I've come to feeling that way, virtually. And I think eventually we'll figure it out, but it's like, I don't know. It's hard.
So partly that's related to when I think about, sorry, I don't mean to just interrupt you on that, Caleb, but
no, go.
The curation, where does curation go, or why is curation needed, or where do those groups go south? It's when you have people that are not at the same experience level as you. B, they don't align with your values, so they're not aimed in the same direction. And maybe C, they're not maybe in the same demographic or whatever you want to say, right? So there's key things that are mismatched, and they result in connections that are low value. So I have struggled with this if you go to like a networking event and you have actual people that are doing like entrepreneurship or something. I'm not trying to say I'm the greatest thing ever, but it's like, hey, I'm legitimately trying to run a business here. I have legitimate needs. I want to connect with people that are similar to me. If you have two people there that I would not relate with, someone that's like an executive at a Fortune 500 company, he's probably not going to be there anyways. But if he's running this huge company or something, I'm not going to relate to him. All his advice or whatever he's going to say was probably not going to be relevant to me.
Right.
The same way, if you have some teenage guy or some guy
doesn't have a job, never said it.
Yeah. It's like, it's kind of like,
it's kind of what you said of like one step ahead or one step behind, 2 steps ahead, 2 steps up, but versus if somebody's 100 steps behind, 100 steps ahead.
Yeah. So then I'm going to opt out. I'm not going to go to that because it's a waste of my time.
Right.
So what I was just thinking about is relative to the 2 Cent Dad thing, or even this lunch club thing. Could you say, you almost fill out like a questionnaire, how, with the lunch club thing, it's like, okay, how big's your business? What are you hoping to accomplish? Right. What are your goals for the next like 5 years or 10 years or 1 year? And you naturally select out, and then it's going to pair you with someone that, hey, has a sales bottleneck, and their company's the same size as you, and they have the same growth potential. And then how do you have something that vets like wannabes out or something, say, hey, what have you actually done?
Right.
I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. But the same with the parenting thing, or the 2 Cent Dad thing is, could you have the same thing? It's like, hey, this is how many kids I have. This is their ages, and this is what I'm concerned about. And this is what I do for a living. This is where I'm geographically located. You start to build that database, and then you can match people up and say, hey, you should meet with Kaylin and chat or something. And then you're kind of like, well, what do they want to chat about? Like, why? It's like a blind date. And you're like, what how do you structure those conversations? Like, is it enough just to
Right.
make the introduction, or
Right.
are you like you kind of give them curriculum or something to talk about? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. Like,
Right.
what is that?
Right.
I'm trying to say
Yeah.
like, how would I respond to that? Like, what would I want?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, totally. Like I've been very proactively thinking about with the podcast I've been doing about like making conversation and finding things to talk about, finding jumping off points. But it takes work, like it takes effort to do that. And yeah, if you just go into it, even if you genuinely want to have the connection and want to have the conversation, making it a little easier for people to get things going. And that's also where the time boxing thing helps too, right? Like 5 minutes
Hmm.
is a lot easier than like an hour long
Hmm.
conversation. Like if you click, it could go great. If you don't click, it's like you're trying to get off the call after 15 minutes. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Um, and so, yeah, it's an
You don't have to
interesting
say like
thing.
at a conference. You don't have to be like, I got to go to the bathroom. I
Yeah,
mean, or
yeah.
yeah, I got a lunch meeting. I got a call in 10 minutes.
There's so many
Not that
ways.
I've ever used that.
Not that you would ever do that, but there's so many ways in a conference to just parlay off to some other activity, or it's just
Yeah.
there's just so many things about it that make it easy to move around and to network.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the matchmaking there is super interesting. Like somebody that is at a similar life stage, maybe has worked through some of the things I'm working through right now.
Yeah.
Or maybe you take two dads and maybe I can help them with some technical issue, right? Or some business
Yeah.
issue, right? Like that I'm really fascinated with that interplay of the personal and the professional. Like cuz my whole
Yeah.
network is like they say don't mix business with pleasure, but my whole network are people who I would consider friends and they're also work contacts and I don't know. I think that's kind of life. Like, I think that's just the way relationships work. Um,
I emphatically believe that that's life. I mean, that is that's where I've gotten so much value out of my network, and
mhm,
I think that's what I'm trying to do with Tucson Dad is build my network because I
mhm,
know it's going to make me a better person. It's going to
mhm.
lead to business value. It's going to help other people. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So that's interesting you say though. Is it enough to connect dads that want to be intentional? Is there enough to talk about? Like, because I just had a podcast earlier this morning with this guy who runs an organization called Daddy Saturday. The guy's name is Justin Batt, Batt, and he said that you know dads and men have like an ego, like they don't want to admit that
Totally,
they're not doing a good job,
totally.
and
Yeah.
I mentioned that earlier in this podcast. That's part of the reason why I wouldn't produce content because I was like I was feeling bad. I was feeling like I
Exactly.
wasn't doing a good job. Or
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
so which is interesting when you think about like a connection mechanism to network. You're not going to just network about how you can be a better dad. Like that's not enough to carry
It's
the
almost like you need an
conversation.
excuse to talk about something else that's
Right.
like work
Right.
related, and then you tie
Yeah.
in like the dad stuff almost as like a little
Yeah.
sneak attack. Because it's like dads are different than moms, right? Women in
Yeah.
general don't have the same problem to the same extent because they don't have that same ego in the same way. They're more relational. They go to their mom's
Yeah.
groups, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just more baked into how they're designed, right? And like men are just like we're not as relational. We're much quicker to stop being relational and focus on work, throw ourselves into work. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think you're onto something. Like you got to figure out how to ease that transition of how am I going to talk to some guy I don't even know and speak to them vulnerably about how I'm doing as a dad. Like that's a tough,
Yeah.
like that's what I want, but it's hard for me to get there with somebody that I don't really know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe it's as simple as
I
having
agree with that.
some maybe it's as simple as having some questions that and that would be kind of valuable, right? Is like every week there's these matches happening and all you're doing is kickstarting with 3 4 different questions that kind of get the ball rolling, that are
Yeah.
topical related to stuff that's going on in the world, whatever. Like that
Yeah.
seems simple, but that could really kind of get the ball rolling a little bit. But you got to do it in a way that isn't cheesy. You know what I mean? Like that, it could be like,
Yeah.
it could quickly be like, here's the curriculum to discuss for today. Like,
No thanks. Let's not do that.
exactly.
Oh man.
It's a tough thing to figure out, man. It's a tough nut to
Tell
crack.
me about your feelings and how did that make you feel? Like, no. But
It's exactly
that's
what I'm not
interesting.
gonna do.
Yeah, it's exactly that's part of the journey, knowing what you're not going to do, right?
Yeah.
The interesting thing is the way I feel like I've engaged more with a positive vein of Twitter in the past 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
Maybe 6 months, but mostly 3 to 4 months. And I've curated my feed and I've followed people intentionally. One of the biggest themes has been physical fitness, and I've been following people, but I didn't have a conscious, I wasn't actively seeking that out. Like, I want to find some fitness experts.
Same
It
here.
was more, I wanted to find more positive people, and I started following some people, and then you see like
That was the
post
common
that they
theme.
like,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
that was a common theme, or other related people start popping up on your feed because they're retweeting them or whatever, and so you start getting exposure, and that became a common theme. And I was encouraged. I was challenged, and then I was encouraged and kind of equipped, I would say, because I started following these people to up my fitness game.
Yeah.
And just like we were talking about intermittent fasting and doing like pull-ups and
Yeah.
all this stuff. But it wasn't like I filled out a form to say, I want to talk to Kaylin about fitness. And then we got on a call
Right.
and I said, tell me your fitness routine. And
Like,
how do you feel? How do you feel
That sounds
when you're
horrible.
doing a pull-up? It sounds horrible. It's horrible. It's like, no, that's not what we want. So that's not what we want.
And
That's
yet, like, the content is what you want. Like, that is
Right.
it, right? But it's like, yeah, it's what you said. It's
which is what I've kind of done with the podcast, or what any podcast does. I bring a guest on, they're talking about something, and then a listener is listening to it, and they might not, some episodes it might be like, this guy, I don't know, I'm not relating to this person at all, or I don't get any value out of it. They might skip it, or they might do the walkout, but some, they're saying, hey, I'm challenged by this, but they didn't raise their hand, they didn't email me and say, hey, can you give me some 5 tips from this guy or something like that.
Right.
So how do you take that and almost just make it more intentional? Or I don't know. I'm not sure that I have it formulated in my head.
That's that tension of, like, as an individual, you can find all of the accountability, all of the mentorship that you need. It's all out there. It's all free. If you take the time and you have the motivation and you do that. So that's that tension, but then on the flip side, there is got to be a way to package that up, make it easier. And there's so much value there to create a business model around it so that you can then put as much time and energy as you can into it. There's got to be a way to do that. But
what if there's a notion for what you said, it's related to the people value what they pay for. Like, I bought a $25 course or ebook from this guy, Jack Colson, because he talks about, different body weight exercises. I could have looked those up on YouTube. I could have researched them.
Right.
But I wanted it to be easy for me. One, I just wanted it, like, I don't want to have to search around for it. I want it to be efficient, is one. And then two, I kind of was like, hey, I want to commit to this, and I want to say I'm going to follow this. And then because I put some money on the line, I mean, it's not a lot of money, but it's like, it's not just a video that I watched and I can just toss it aside. Oh yeah, I watched that thing, but whatever. It's like, hey, I actually put some money on this. I should probably use it,
Right.
So there's a dynamic there that if I think about that in like a 2 Cent Dad, context, it's kind of like you're almost talking about selling a course then that has some aspect of maybe a Q&A, right? Mm-hmm. Where there's an expert, maybe that's part of the maybe it's a Q&A session, or I don't know. I mean, there's a value in the discussion, but it's not a discussion just around a certain topic that is going to be like, okay, Caitlin, tell me about your problems. Going around a circle. It's not like that. You're saying
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to do it. But there's got to be some combination of the content, the community. So if somebody wants to pay some money, get everything packaged up. Hey, here are the things I need to do. Here are the things I need to focus on. And by the way, here's a community I can connect to. Maybe even here's some matchmaking. I'm going to do a call every week with somebody, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the ways to kind of scale that is like if you have to do that call every week with every person in your community, that's a lot of
Yeah.
calls. But
Right.
if you flip the switch and you match people up to do calls within the community, then you can kind of scale that. And there's a lot of the value in doing a call is just being able to talk and hear what
Yeah.
you're saying out loud, and then you realize like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, so creating those calls, creating those connections, combine that with some other stuff. I mean, I think that there's a lot of value there. But I think maybe that's a good place to stop here. We're about at our time. And I'm
I was
looking
gonna say I
forward
got to go
to.
get like a beer or something, and we can go for hour number 2.
Yeah, I gotta start I guess doing these 3 hour podcasts. That's where I want to
Right.
get
Right.
eventually. A lot of
Joe Rogan style, man.
yeah. That's eventually what I'm gonna get to. Um, but yeah, no man, I
We got
love
to dissect.
everything.
I want to dissect your podcast next time because you are insanely you put out so much content and you have a lot of really good connections and you also have a business, and I'm curious to understand your what's inside your head of where the vision you have for it is.
That sounds good, man. I would
All
love
right.
that. I would love that.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Sounds good, man.
Well, Mike, where's the best place for people to find you online if they are not already following you?
Twitter is a good one at Sudyk, Sudyk. You can look me up there, or 2 Cent Dad, the number 2centdad.com is where I have my podcast and blog and everything.
Awesome.
So check it out.
Very good. Awesome, man. I will talk to you soon.